Welcome to Wonders and Miracles podcast, where we celebrate miraculous moments in everyday lives. I'm Liza Lawrence. I'm glad to have you join me as we celebrate wonders and miracles together. All right, so before we get started with my guest today, I would just want to share a really touching experience that happened this last month. So if you remember, a month ago, I interviewed a gal named Melissa Miller who had a pinky promise from God. It was episode 110, Melissa's Pinky Promise from God. If you haven't listened to it, go listen to it. She in there shares how her pinky was amputated. And right before that, the Lord had prompted her to start playing her violin again, but she didn't have a violin. So she bought a really cheap violin, started playing again, it broke, and now she's saving up for a real violin. And what was sweet, this experience, I got an email from an anonymous donor who said he would love to donate money to Melissa so she could get her violin. It was so touching. And I had a couple actually donors say, reach out to me and want to contribute to this. So I just sent Melissa this money and it is enough to buy her violin. And she said, I just want to read her response. She said, "Oh my gosh, are you for real? I'm in tears right now. Can you tell them all thank you from the bottom of my heart? Oh heavens, what a huge blessing. This is incredible. I'm so excited to find a quality violin to play for years to come." So I just want to thank all of the donors and the generous people out there that help each other. And that's part of the miracles that we are for people and that we receive in this life. So thank you so much. All right, now we'll jump into my guest today. Well, I am excited to be here today with Jodi Wilding from Utah, who is a cancer survivor, and she's going to share her medical miracles and things that happened to her in the year 2018. She actually had several health issues that hit her all at once, and her story is amazing, and I'm excited to hear all the beautiful things that happened and probably the challenging things that happened as well. So Jodi, thank you so much for being on the show, and tell us a little bit about who you are and then your miracle story.
Well, thank you for having me. I guess just kind of in a nutshell, my miracles kind of centered around my running. I have been a runner for, probably 13 years. And my big goal was to finally be able to qualify for the Boston Marathon. And I was able to run that in 2017 and then again in 2018. And maybe that was kind of a omen of what was about to happen, because the Boston Marathon that year, it went down in the record books as the worst conditions in the history of the marathon. It was, I called a freezing monsoon-a-thon. It really took all I had to finish that day. It was pretty crazy. The big joke kind of was, if you want to know what it was like, then to put a treadmill in a car wash and turn the temperature to 30 degrees and stay there for 4 hours. And that's about what it was. It was that crazy. In fact, there were, I think 65% of the elite men dropped out, or maybe it was 55%. And the women, it was record numbers that didn't even finish that year. So, I mean, it was pretty crazy. Wow. It was very intense and not something that anyone would want to experience. If I was praying for this perfect weather and hoping for that, and no, but I was going to run it no matter what. And I'm glad I did. I finished. It was kind of, like I said, might have been the little introduction to what was about to hit me.
Interesting. Yeah. And anyone who runs a marathon, I'm just totally in awe of. Let me just say that. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's a little crazy, but. And then after that, well, I just wanted to insert here. One of my favorite scriptures has always been Hebrews 12. And it says, "Let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith." And let's just say that was not the race that I wanted to be set before me. It's like I wanted these perfect conditions, but like you said, like you just have to, we don't always get to choose, what's going to be put before us. And we just have to decide, are we going to run it, or are we going to give up? So
I
That's
love
kind
that.
of a good metaphor for life. I think.
Yes.
I've always tried to really maintain a high level of fitness and health, but I learned firsthand that life is fragile, and no matter how much we take care of ourselves, our bodies can kind of still sell us out and surprise us with things that we totally never anticipated. And so it was in late November of 2018, that same year, the marathon was in April. And so in November, I was told that I had a herniated disc. And we think it probably happened during the marathon because I had already had some disc problems, but because it was so cold and I was just tense the whole time that I think I even felt when it happened, it was like mile 18. Anyway, so I was told that I would not be able to run probably if that was the case. And I'm pretty stubborn. And I was like, well, I'm going to prove them wrong. And then out of nowhere, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, which was really shocking because, I'm fairly healthy and hadn't been really any family history. And 2 weeks after that, we had gone on a fun family vacation into Wyoming and riding snowmobiles. I was driving, had my husband on the back and my grandson on as well. And we went over a tiny, maybe a 12-inch ledge. And my husband was like, well, let me get off first. And I'm like, no, it's really no big deal. These were different snowmobiles than I was used to. But anyway, I drove up this little ledge and it just completely flipped the snowmobile. And everyone was luckily miraculously got off except for me. My leg was pinned underneath it. And my poor husband had all his strength to try and get that off. And he really struggled trying to lift it off of my leg. He finally got it off of me. And of course, assumed I was smart enough to move my leg out from under it. And he couldn't hold it anymore. So he dropped it back down on my leg. And because I really couldn't move, and I think I was in shock, but it took him a little bit longer. He was finally able to get it back off of me. And that time I was smart enough to actually move it out of the way. But that resulted in it broke my fibula, just did a really mess to all my ligaments and just tore everything. But at the time, I didn't really realize the extent of the damage, of how long the recovery would be. And so 3 days later, I showed up for my cancer surgery in a wheelchair. And they were like, what is going on? And explained to them what happened. And the surgery went well, everything was as planned. And then the next day, we found out I had blood clots in my legs, the DVT, like several. Thankfully, my husband is a physician, or I don't know what would have happened, because he just said, no, we're going down. I didn't want to, because it was just, if you just touched my leg at that point, it was just, I thought, okay, they're going to be doing an ultrasound. I just don't think I can take that. So I says, no, let's just not worry about it. I'm sure I'm fine. He's like, no, we're going. See, I told him he saved my life, because he said that was his redemption for the whole snowmobile thing.
Were the blood clots because of the snowmobile accident? Is that what you said? Yeah.
Yeah. They were pretty sure that's what had caused them. So yeah. So got on blood thinners, and then I couldn't put any weight on my leg. I was basically laid up for several months. And then right after that, my mom, not wanting to miss out on this great party that I was having, she ended up being rushed to the hospital with chest pain, and on Christmas Eve had a quadruple bypass, which was really hard because I'm her only daughter. And I due to my situation, I couldn't be there, couldn't help out in any way. And then right after that, I was diagnosed with severe osteoporosis. So it was just like I was looked up to heavens, and I thought, okay, is there a bow and arrow pointing down on me and I'm the target? Because it all happened so fast in such a short amount of time, just crazy stuff going on. So
yeah, that is crazy to have one thing after another.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, and then during this time, after, got my mom situated and felt like she was going to do fine, I kind of just started focusing back on the cancer. And I hadn't known right now what the results were, my form of treatment was going to be. So I was really worried about that. I have several friends that had just gone through chemo and with breast cancer, and it was pretty terrifying for me. It was the last thing that I wanted to have to deal with. And I just prayed so hard that I could avoid chemo. I'd be totally fine with whatever else, but I just prayed and prayed that I would be able to avoid the chemo. But I had gone to see my oncologist, and my tumor had been upgraded to a grade 3, which I wasn't aware of until I went to that appointment, which is not good. It's that's the highest number it can be. That's not the stage of cancer. That was just the tumor grade. but my lymph nodes looked really good. So that was positive. And the type of cancer I had, it's called hormone receptor positive and HER2 negative, which if you're going to have breast cancer, that's probably the best kind that you want to have. And so they put all these numbers into a computer, and then it comes out with what they call an oncotype. And my oncotype needed to be below 25 in order to avoid chemo. So that's kind of what I focused on. I prayed, I visualized what my numbers were going to be. I feel like, you have to have faith if you want a miracle, and faith without works is dead. So I thought, okay, what can I do? I really tried to use that time to study and learn all I could about what it was going to take for me to receive a miracle. It was probably, I don't know, maybe a week or two after that appointment, just really focusing as hard as I could on everything. I was actually praying at the time, just praying, okay, this is, Heavenly Father, I've done what I can. I've tried to endure this well. I am just, I will be so grateful if I can avoid chemotherapy. And I told him, I know you can move mountains. And so I know you can do this for me. I know you can make these numbers low. And I told him, I'm trying to cast out my fear and just hold on to the faith. Right at that time, I just finally decided, you know what, I'm just laying it all on the altar. I just said, if it is your will for me to have chemotherapy, I will accept that. I will totally accept that. And that really, I think, made all the difference when I finally just submitted over to him, because it was really interesting. Right then, the phone rang right during my prayer. And I could see that it was from Salt Lake. And I thought, okay, I know this is my oncologist calling in. Sure enough, it was. And she said, hey, is this Jodi? This is Dr. Henry. Do you have a minute? And that kind of, that's kind of worrisome. But I said, yes. And she says, we got your results back, and there's good news. Your oncotype was a 16. And my heart just kind of stopped. I was so grateful. I had just received a miracle, because it was not pointing to that. And so no chemo. I didn't have to have chemo. I did have to have 5 weeks of radiation, and I'm on chemo hormone therapy pills for 5 to 10 years. But that was such a relief and huge miracle. I knew right then I had just received a huge miracle. But then things continued. So it's kind of like, okay, this cancer thing, it's actually, I tell people throughout this whole crazy ordeal, the cancer was like seriously the least part of it all. Like, it was just so minimal compared to everything that was going on with my leg. So we did radiation. I was in a cast part of the time and on either a walker or wheelchair or crutches. But I couldn't really use crutches because I had just had the breast cancer surgery, and it was really hard to do that. So yeah, so I was on a walker. I kind of joke around and say I went from being a runner to a walker on a walker, and then a limper, and kind of getting back to, hopefully I'll be back to really running. I'm gradually doing that, but so just, and it was kind of interesting, just putting on a sock back then, I just took so much for granted, because putting on a sock in the morning, it literally took 5 minutes to just put on a sock. And it was kind of comical, but I just realized we just take so much for granted in our lives, and just kind of really so much gratitude for everything. And it really wasn't all that bad. Being forced to be laid up for that amount of time, I decided, okay, I'm just going to pretend that I'm in a luxurious spa every day, and I have 3 meals brought into me, and just kind of like, okay, we're looking for the good. So it was not that bad, at least on my part. I feel bad for my husband. And so just kind of focused that time on trying to heal. But despite all that, it was really challenging for me, because I was just not used to being that kind of lifestyle. I was always go, go, go. And I thought, okay, so you have the choice here how you're going to deal with this. So early on, I decided I was going to focus on 3 things as I patiently tried to endure this, because I knew it was going to be kind of a long-term thing. And so I decided I was going to approach it with positivity, gratitude, and humor. I thought those would be the things that I thought, okay, if I could just focus on these, this will help pull me through some rough patches. So I watched a lot of I Love Lucy, Carol Burnett reruns. Those, they say laughter is the best medicine. And if anyone can make you laugh, it's definitely Lucy and Carol. And I just tried to focus so much on gratitude. I just feel like there's such a huge power in gratitude that's untapped, that I just don't think we use as much as we need to in our lives. And I just felt so drawn to that and just did a gratitude journal the whole time and just really tried to just focus on those three things. In January, I began physical therapy for my knee because it had been casted. There was a lot of other problems that we weren't sure what was going on because I couldn't bend it anymore. I lost my extension, and luckily I got into physical therapy when I did. They said if I had waited a week more, I would have never got my full extension back, which would be never running and walking abnormally for the rest of my life. So that was another miracle right there. But anyway, I went to see a specialist in March. This is a whole nother miracle right here. When I arrived, I was waiting for them to x-ray my knee, and they said, well, we need to x-ray your ankle. And I said, why are you x-raying my ankle? My ankle's completely fine. There's nothing wrong with my ankle. And they says, well, you've made an appointment with the ankle specialist, so we're gonna just go through and we'll do your ankle. So they x-rayed my ankle, go in to meet with this doctor. And after he had looked at my x-ray, he came in and he said that my ankle bone, it's called the talus bone, was actually dying due to lack of blood flow. It's called avascular necrosis, so AVN. And he told me that due to the injury, I would likely never be able to run. I was just devastated. I'm not sure how I held it together during that appointment, but I held it together. Anybody that knows me know that is worse than asking me to give up chocolate if I'm not running, because chocolate is a big thing to me. But running, it was like, give up running. It's like one of my greatest blessings. It's kind of my therapy. I had a son pass away 15 years ago, and that's when I kind of started to run. And it's just been what I think it really was what is my therapy. Get me outside every day. I love it. But despite that news, I was truly filled with deep gratitude that I would still be able to walk at least normally again. But the stubbornness in me kind of came out, and I thought, this isn't going to happen. Like, I am going to run again. He told me to come back in 2 months. So during that time, I received what in my religion is called a priesthood blessing. And it's kind of the laying on of hands of the elders in our church to give you a blessing. And in that blessing, I was promised that I would run again. And I held on to that blessing so tight with all that I had. And I had also heard a voice during this time, like I just call it the Spirit, had whispered to me that my running days are far from over. And so those two things, even despite everything that I was being told, I just thought, okay, there was a reason why I've been told these things and why I've heard these things. So I'm just going forward with this, with faith, and I'm going to believe those, even though I had a lot of doubts during all this, and it was definitely tough at times. But I also used that time to truly study about miracles and faith. And there was so much I didn't know. And I really wanted to learn how to kind of push these things forward in my life, because I was kind of feeling a little desperate. But I did have great faith. I have been blessed with great faith. And that's just one of, I guess, a gift that I have always had. There's just so much power in faith. Our prophet of our church, he actually said, faith is the power that enables the unlikely to accomplish the impossible. And I thought, oh, I love this. And just recently, he said, which I wish I would have had this quote during all of this, he said, moving your mountains may require a miracle. Learn about miracles. So I thought, I tried to learn about miracles. Miracles come according to your faith in the Lord. Central to that faith is trusting his will and timetable. That's a biggie. How and when he will bless you with the miraculous help you desire. Only your unbelief will keep God from blessing you with miracles to move the mountains in your life. And he calls those mountains the mountains of misery in our life. And I'm thinking, wow, that's just so true. So really tried hard to learn and focus on all of that. And then 2 months after that devastating news, I went back in, and he did another x-ray series, and he looked at him and he said, well, nothing has changed. And he warned me. He was a former runner, and I guess most runners, he knows, most runners just don't listen to doctors. It's just how it is. But he just very seriously said that if I do run, I will do permanent damage to my ankle and might not ever walk normally again. And he gave me all of this stuff that could happen. And I was devastated, to say the least. That was probably the most difficult part of the whole trial right there. But I still promised in that blessing, I was holding on tight to that, especially the part where I had heard my running days are far from over. And so I decided I'm going to get a second opinion. So I went to another ankle specialist, and he had me do a completely new MRI. but I had to wait 3 weeks before I could get the results back and before he was back in the office. And so once again, I just tried so hard to just have all the faith. I would just visualize every day my ankle healing, anything that I could think of that would help with the process, and just completely had faith that it would, totally positive that I was going to be healed. I think I also came to a point during this where I finally was willing to turn it over to God and just accept his will, even if that meant that I would never run again. That is such a spiritual struggle to get to that point, but I completely submitted and surrendered my own will to that of Heavenly Father's. But at the same time, I still had faith that I would be healed. It's like a paradox. I mean, you submit to his will, but yet at the same time, I am still going to believe that I'm going to be healed. And I knew that I had to have faith also not to be healed. I knew that my faith in my Savior could not be dependent on the outcome. Like, I was still going to have faith. I was still going to believe. I was still going to trust, even if my ankle was not healed. That was tough because I had a very deep desire to run again. I mean, it was huge. I wanted to also just throw in this other scripture it's actually in Alma 26:12. It says, I know I am nothing as to my own strength. I am weak. Therefore, I will not boast of myself, but I will boast of my God. For in his strength, I can do all things. And I just felt like I just needed to acknowledge him in that, because it's kind of out of my hands. After much prayer and fasting by my family and many others, I was so blessed to have so much outside help from people just praying for me and fasting for me. I felt like I did have enough faith for another miracle, at least as much as a mustard seed. I know you only need to have enough faith as a mustard seed. Like, I for sure have that much faith, but I wasn't sure I'd be granted another one. It's almost like, okay, is there a cap on miracles? Is there, but then I thought, well, God can do anything. And I have a firm testimony, and I just thought there are no limits. And so I returned 3 weeks later to that specialist. And after examining my ankle and that MRI, he just very nonchalantly said, hey, it looks good. Your ankle bone is alive and there are no signs of AVN. He didn't want to know anything what the other doctor had told me. And I kind of had let some of that slip out, but he was just like completely positive. And I was so gratefully stunned. I just was like, wait a minute, did you just say that my ankle bone is not dying? Does that mean I can run? And he said, yeah, of course, but not right away. It's going to take some time. You've got a lot of damage in there. It's going to take some time. So don't just be out there thinking that you're going to just overnight be able to get back, out there racing. And I said, oh, thank you so much. I don't care how long it takes, So definitely I was stunned, and I had just received another huge miracle. That's kind of the wrap up of all the miracles. I just felt like, wow, this is incredible just to be blessed with so much. And I guess I have to say too, that I don't know why sometimes we are given a miracle and other times we're only given the strength to endure our trials or our challenges. But I do know that no matter what, life is a miracle in itself, and, being able to just find the joy in life. But I know that a lot of people aren't given those miracles. And I've had many times in my life where I wasn't given those miracles. And, I don't know the reasons or the purposes of it. I just know that I was blessed at this time. I don't know why, but I'm so grateful for all of that.
Beautiful, beautiful story and beautiful miracles. And I think that is the big question that we always ask. Like, why do some people have miracles and some don't? And I don't think we know. We don't understand the workings of God. And that's okay. It is okay to I love your journey of submitting your will to God each time. And it is a spiritual struggle to truly say, okay, this is what I want, but I also have to lay it all on the line and not be too attached to the outcome. And sometimes I do wonder if that helps with the process of miracles and that flow of receiving, rather than being in a really tight sort of restriction of it has to happen versus a relaxed receptive.
I think that made all the difference. Like, both times, it was almost waiting until I was able to get to that point for the miracles to happen. It was like, wow. I think that's probably one of the biggest things I learned, like what you had just said. You just kind of have to let go of your tight grip, let go and let God. And if it's his will, once you're able to accept whatever his plan is. And of course, we know his plan is always greater than ours. He always knows the big picture where we just have such a tiny view, that it's just that release of submitting. I almost think that's the secret to miracles. That's kind of where I'm at.
I wonder. And I was going to ask you that, you sounds like you studied miracles and faith and, what were the specific things you learned? So perhaps submitting and being receptive is part of that. Were there other things you learned in your study of miracles?
I think the one thing, and I'm not into any woo-woo stuff at all. I mean, that's just not me, but I feel like visualizing in your mind every single day. I made it a point every single day when I got in the shower. That's when I took the time to just visualize my ankle healing. I mean, and I even got on the internet to try and see what that bone looked like and the blood flow to it, and just kind of what I needed in my head to just kind of see how that process would work. And so I think that was another big thing that I learned. You just kind of have to, like I said, you need to do some work. It's not just something that we just think, oh, please. I know that happens a lot. We just ask and we do receive. But I think a lot of times we do need to work hard and do what we can, like do our part. And then I think that's when we see a lot of the blessings too. So
yeah, there is a lot of knowledge out there on the power of visualization and the power of gratitude. I loved that you shared that. I agree with you that I think we underutilize that incredible power of gratitude.
I have learned so much about that too. And that, I think a lot of that I learned from the passing of my son. I think that he was 17 when he passed, and your natural tendency is to just think, oh gosh, we're not going to get to see him graduate from high school. We're not going to get to see him marry. We're not going to see his children. We're not going to see anything that he does in life. And it's so easy to just kind of get in that. And when we do, it's just like, it just takes you down this hole that you don't want to go down. And we learned early on that if we just focused on, we are so grateful we had him for 17 years, because he had cystic fibrosis, which is a very ongoing disease. And we are lucky we had him for those 17 years. And we're grateful that he was healthy most of that time. And, just completely changing that perspective, it's like magic. I tell my sons this, it's just almost like someday it's going to be scientifically proven that it's the key to the whole universe. Gratitude is, because it's when you're able to just let go of the poor me, or just focus on what you've got instead of what you've not. That's kind of my big mantra. It's just, there's so much that we have. And when we focus on that, it's not as painful, and it almost, you're not even worried about that anymore. It just changes your life. There's so much more peace and happiness. Right.
Really and I think gratitude can bring on miracles as well. I love that mantra. Will you say that again? Focus on what you've got.
And focus on what you've got instead of what you've not. Yeah.
I love that. I've experienced that as well. I've often been taught, I like to meditate and really pray and be with God a lot. And every time I'm wallowing in self-pity, I hear, wait.
Yeah.
What do you want instead? Like, stop focusing on what you don't want. And what do you want instead? Like, change your focus, change your vision. And I think there's power in that.
A lot of power. It's an untapped power, which is unfortunate, because it's just, if we just knew.
I love that too, that someday the scientists will figure out and prove that how powerful it is. I think you're right.
I really believe that.
Yeah,
it really is.
Well, Jodi, your story is beautiful and amazing. And I'm so happy for you that you've been able to see the healing and see the miracles. I think that's another key, is to notice those miracles and not take them for granted, but to really acknowledge, like, wow, God's hand was involved in this. And I love the moment when you're praying and the phone rings. Like, that's just such a beautiful miracle moment with connection of, wow, God answered right then.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. I love that.
Amazing.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, anything else you want to share, or things you learned through this before we wrap up?
I guess to kind of go back to tie it all in with my running, we must run the race that is set before us. We don't get to choose. We just kind of have to accept and go forward. And I've always said that running teaches me so many life lessons, but no more so than the race that I had done in 2018, because I did not want to run in those conditions that were set before me. Not at all. I was wanting just great weather, but I wasn't given the choice. I didn't get that choice. And so that was the race, like I had said before, that was set before me. And it's the same thing. And it was actually the weather that I had feared the most, that I never wanted to run in. But it's sometimes exactly with life. I think often we're given the very trials and adversities that we would not choose and definitely not hope for. But sometimes trials rain down upon us all at once and with no break in between. And sometimes like I said, we're given the very thing we fear the most. And almost always we doubt our abilities to endure those trials. And I think sometimes we definitely wish they would be taken away. But in most cases, we don't get that choice. We can't reject them. They're just part of our lives. And we do have to endure them. We have to run that race that is set before us. And when we finish that race, we're often surprised, I think, at the strength that we find deep inside ourselves that we didn't even realize that we possessed. And I think we are given that power beyond our own to complete the race. For in his strength, we can do all things. And the race of life that is set before us is challenging. It's one of those challenging marathons that requires endurance. And if we expect to cross that finish line with our arms high above our head, we need to just realize that it's how we respond to those trials. And in the end, no matter what race that we get, we are capable of running it so much better than we ever believed we could, or walking or limping it, I guess, whatever point we're at. But that's kind of been my focus, that it's really kind of sums it all up for me. So.
Well, I love that. Amen. I think it's beautiful and a powerful metaphor with life. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I have really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for listening to this miracle story. Please subscribe to my channel if you